Hey everybody, Tim Travels, Terry your host, coming at you today. Just quick video, wanted to update a couple of things, and we're going to talk about, and this may end up going into a second video, but because the subject's kind of complicated, but I wanted to talk about employee-owned companies, and specifically their ESOPs, or employee stock ownership program or policy. But first, I want to just update you on my location. Beatrice and I are in Brush, Colorado, at the Loves here, and fortunately for us, the rancher / farmer who owns the property right next door to the truck stop spread manure recently. So we're getting the full Western ranch experience here today. But you know what? I actually, it doesn't bother me that much. Anyway, so Colorado, I mean, it's a place I come fairly frequently. It's a place I love. Colorado has 54 mountains over 14,000 feet, although I think they revised that list a few years ago. But anyway, I've actually climbed up 5 of them many years ago, but maybe someday when I retire I'll do some more of them. And there's some of them pretty famous, like Pikes Peak is above 14,000 feet. But although I think you can drive up that one. Anyway, so Colorado, just a quick tidbit about Colorado, in addition to the thing about the 14ers. Colorado's called the Centennial State, right? That's the state's nickname. Why is it called the Centennial State? Well, Centennial means 100-year anniversary. Turns out, Colorado became a state in 1876, or on the centennial of the birth of the United States, August 1st, 1876. So anyway, it's a big deal, and Colorado is the 8th largest state in terms of total area. So, but it's a great place to visit. There's lots of cool stuff to do here, but if you ever come out here, if you're not from the West, or you just haven't traveled much, there's 2 things. If I was going to go, let's say, west of the Mississippi, there are 2 things that I would put on my list to visit. The first is the Grand Canyon, and that's in Arizona, but I just mentioned that because you cannot get a sense of the Grand Canyon until you go there and experience it in person. It will way exceed your expectations. You will not be able to take enough of it in. And I've been there a few times to the Grand Canyon, and it never gets old. You never see this. I mean, it is obviously huge, but it's not just the Grand Canyon. It's like an experience. It's like a life experience. And then the other thing, and this is a national park in southwest Colorado, down by the Four Corners. It's Mesa Verde National Park. If you haven't been there, it is really cool, really cool. Ancient civilization, predecessor civilization, the Anasazi to, I guess, modern day Navajo, but really, really cool. Anyway, so getting back to a couple of news items, or personal items. So my wife is COVID free. Everybody's done with the quarantine. So I'm actually going home this weekend. I got home time, and which is a little unusual for me because that's only a 2 week, less than 2 weeks. But then once I'm done with that, since I didn't get to see my whole family the last time I was home, I'll probably be out for about 6 weeks. So I told my DM I would go home for Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then I'll get back on the road and stay out until Easter. So that's the update in that. So let's talk about employee-owned companies and how companies end up employee-owned and what it means if you're an employee. A lot of trucking companies advertise that. It's like a selling point, own a piece. Why work for a company when you can own it? And 100% employee owned, and there are various taglines, but why would that be a selling point? And what do you really need to know about that? How's the sausage being made, I guess, is the question. So to understand this, first what you have to understand is that there are two kinds of trucking companies, essentially. There are privately held and there are publicly held. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I work for GP Transco. GP Transco is privately held. A company that's publicly held is the holding company that owns, and by the way, I see this, there's a Crete guy next to me. Crete is actually, I don't know. I think Crete is still privately held. But an example of a publicly held company would be J.B. Hunt, publicly held, Schneider. The holding company that owns Knight Transportation, Swift, bar none, out of Granger, Iowa, and Abilene Trucking, which is, they're mostly on the East Coast, but they have these, they all have green tractors. But all four of those companies are under the KNX Knight ticker symbol. So there's a holding company, and then there's Knight Transportation, Swift, and the other two companies. And they all kind of, I know a lot of people think there was a merger between Swift and Knight. That's not really true. They just became owned by the same holding company. And Dave Jackson is the president of, or CEO of that enterprise. And, I'm sure that I know that the people at Knight exert some influence over Swift and probably the other companies too. So that's the difference. But that KNX symbol, you can look that up. I think they're listed on the New York Stock Exchange. You can see what their share price is today. Okay? Why that matters is that company must tell the public in public filings that are sent to the Securities and Exchange Commission, what profit they have, what cautionary notes they see in the future. Like, for instance, if the company's being sued for $1 billion, they need to disclose that. So it's kind of open kimono. They have to tell the public what it is that's going on, what their books say, what their balance sheet looks like, significant stock sales of company insiders. So like, if you work for a publicly held company and your CEO is like selling all of his stock and you own some of it, you're like, why is the CEO selling everything? Does he know something I don't know? And he might, but if he was actually selling based on that information, that would be insider trading, and that's a felony, because the standard for that is you can't trade to gain or to avoid a loss using material, non-public information. So that's why, and there's a system called EDGAR, EDGAR, that the Securities and Exchange Commission has, that is a public way to access all the filings of any publicly held company. Okay, so there's a lot of transparency, I guess is what I'm saying. So getting back to the ESOPs, the employee stock ownership programs. So how a company ends up getting one of those is typically you have a privately held company, and it's owned by Joe Jones. And Joe Jones and his family, own this company, and their name's on the door. Oh, and by the way, I always see this, we're a family company. And you know what I always say about family companies? If your name isn't the same name as on the door of the truck, and you're not related to the people that own that company, the fact that it's a family company is of no import to you. You know, it's their family, not yours. So don't fall for that. But anyway, so they own a company, right? And no one's really bought them out. No one's really offered. Maybe the reason is because there are some companies, publicly held even, that are fairly acquisitive, meaning they want to buy other trucking companies. A good example of that type of company would be Heartland Express. Heartland Express bought Millis back in 2019. You'd have to ask Millis guys how they feel about that. I have talked to at least one or two that weren't in love with that idea. But again, and apparently Heartland is also looking to buy more. They got a lot of cash on hand. But again, Heartland's publicly held, so you could find out how much cash on hand they have. Anyway, so Joe Jones and his family own this trucking company, but they really just want to cash out. They want to get all the value they can out of the company, not just earn money from the company, but actually have a huge payday. So the only way that that's going to happen is, one, if they sell the company to somebody, like Heartland Express comes in and says, we'll offer you, and I don't even remember what the sale price was of Millis, but let's say we'll offer you $500 million for the company. That's one way. But the other way, and these are both sales, but the other way, the second way, is to sell it to the employees. Well, how that often happens is that an entity is set up that is basically the ESOP. And I don't want to get too into the weeds on corporate law here and everything, but basically an entity is set up. That entity then buys the company from the owners, the people with their name on the door of the truck. Oftentimes, though, that company, that ESOP, unless there's what is called an earnout by the sellers, by the people that held equity ownership in the company, unless there's an earnout over 10 or 20 years, or it could be lower depending on the amount that's, the company sold for, then they have to, if there's not an earnout, the ESOP actually borrows money to buy them out. Well, if you borrow money, right, you're paying interest on it. So the first thing that's happened is, oh, yeah, this is awesome. I'm an employee owner of this company. Well, guess what, Mr. Owner? Your company has a butt ton of debt. And you bought that money that was borrowed all went to pay the people that still have their name on the door of the truck, probably. That's often how it's done. It's, it's a purchase, and it's, related parties, but there's still money changing hands. So what does that mean to the employee owner? Well, first of all, the idea of the ESOP is it's profit sharing. And every year the company will declare, and by the way, the ESOP conveys zero rights to the average employee. You say, well, I'm an employee owner. What does that mean to me? It means nothing. You're not making heck, you're not even going to make a decision about where you get fuel. Okay, that's how little control you have. You have zero control. You have no right to information about the company other than what they choose to release publicly. Like, you can't look at the books. You can't make any management decisions. You can't hire or fire anybody. You're the owner of what I've often referred to as phantom stock. Okay, it's profit sharing, but it's phantom stock. And the other thing to understand about the profit sharing is it's totally discretionary, right? So let's just take you through a quick scenario. So we finish the calendar year and the company says, oh, we had 50 million in net profit. So after everything is paid for, everybody's salaries, buying new trucks, fueling every truck, taxes, insurance, whatever it is, whatever business expense, we still had 50 million bucks left over. Now, the company, right, if they could have a capital expenditure plan that takes additional money out of that and either spends it or sets it aside. But let's just say there's 50 million in profit. Well, the odds are that senior officers of the company, who may still be the family members that sold the company to the ESOP, they are, oftentimes going to receive bonuses because the company's profitable. And then at some point they declare this pile of money that's available for distribution to the employees of the company. But oftentimes these ESOPs have really, really lengthy vesting periods. And just to give you an idea what vesting means, it means that you have control over money that's been put away in some manner. And it means that it goes with you when you leave the company. So like if you have a 401k, it vests immediately, okay? You might not be able to spend it immediately, but it's yours. If, like for instance, my company, GP Transco, makes a 4% match on employees' 401ks. So I have money in my 401k because I've set money aside and then the company's matched it. That 4% that they put it in like every Friday, I think, because that's when we get paid. The money they put in last Friday is mine. If I leave the company, that money's going with me. If I leave today, the money they put in last week's going with me. But not so with ESOPs. They often have lengthy vesting periods. One company I was at, you had to hit a year before the vesting or before the ESOP declaration kind of cutoff date. So for example, if you start in January and the vesting or the ESOP cutoff date is in June, you don't get anything that year. You don't get anything till the following June, right? And then that's year one. Well, my company's vesting went out, it started, you got 20% at year two. So after like 2.5 years, you would have 20% of whatever was put away those first 2 years. You didn't 100% vest until the 5th year, but really it was using like the calendar like I'm using. It's really over 6 years or 5.5 to 6 years out before you vest at 100%. But here's the thing to think about when you're a truck driver. I've said this before, but if you work for a trucking company and they really don't have much else going on, like they don't have a huge brokerage, they don't rent property, they're not renting equipment, they don't have a huge equipment sale operation like some of these companies. The only place that they're making profit is from Joe truck driver driving down the road. That's the only place they're making profit. But here's the thing to think about. If you and your fellow drivers are the only place that they're making profit, when they share profit and they pay out bonuses based on profit, they're basically sharing money that you earned for the company. But there's an incentive, and I'm not saying this is how it is at all companies. But my experience at the company I was at that had an ESOP was they often shortchanged drivers. They cheated drivers out of money. And that cheating drivers drove up their profit. It necessarily drives up the profit. If you don't pay what you said you were going to pay, then that dollar that you saved by shorting an employee, a driver on miles, or not giving him enough miles for him to qualify for a bonus that you hired him under, that's all going into that profit pool. But your DM who didn't give you enough miles, he's getting a piece of that profit from your work. The person who, you know, is in pay, everybody is sharing in that money. And in a company with high driver turnover, it is very likely that the vast majority of people in that company are never going to see a dime of that ESOP. The people that are going to benefit are the people that are sitting in the offices and terminals, the ones that are at a desk when you show up, the people that are in the shop that can't get your truck in on time. You know, those are the people that are benefiting. So don't be fooled into thinking that some ESOP is, you know, some huge benefit for you. Okay. Now, if you go to a same company, and you stay there 30 years, it probably will benefit you. But keep in mind, you probably earned less than you would have earned somewhere else anyway. And it was always discretionary. So, sorry for the length of this video. It is kind of a complicated subject, but I wanted to share that with you, and you know, so you understand when you're looking at companies, what are apples and what are oranges. So anyway, stay safe out there. We will be back on Tim Travels shortly, and have a good one.